Hello, in this video we are going to look at the basics of the Kantian deontological approach to ethics. Now there's quite a bit of sort of technicality in this, and I have done 3 videos on Kant. The 2 subsequent videos to this one go into it in a lot more detail. This really is just a basic primer. The first thing I think that it is important to do is to look at the terminology involved in the Kantian approach. So you need to know what the good will is. Okay, it's a species of practical reason. All right, but it's a species of practical reason that is acting for the sake of duty. Maxims. The idea of maxims is quite a straightforward one. It is just an action guiding principle, and you have to run your action guiding principle through the categorical imperative, which is a kind of formula to determine which acts are right and wrong, in order to call your maxim a moral maxim. All right, and when you've got a moral maxim and you're acting for the sake of duty from that maxim, then you are exercising what Kant calls the good will. There is the term contradiction in concept. I won't explain that now, but in subsequent videos I look at that in quite a lot of detail. Contradiction in will, perfect and imperfect duties, that's what we'll be covering in the final video, and moral objectivism. Now Kant is a moral realist because he believes that you can determine moral truths from the application of reason. So that is something that actually you could use in relation to certain discussions in meta-ethics as well, even though the Kantian version of moral realism is not on the specification. You could certainly use it as a synoptic point. So to summarise, the goodwill, maxims, hypothetical imperatives, which are means to ends imperatives, categorical imperatives, which are ends in themselves, contradiction in concept, contradiction in will, perfect and imperfect duties, and moral objectivism. And you need to know what all of these are and how to explain them. So Kant's basic approach is a duty-based approach. All right, and his approach argues that we have certain basic moral obligations that are absolute. Right, so a moral absolute is a moral claim that is true come what may, right? Such as never break a promise, or always tell the truth, or never lie. All right. Whereas a utilitarian could be thought of as a relativist in the sense that everything is relative to what creates the overall greatest amount of happiness and minimizes pain. So there is no particular moral claim that holds absolutely, right? The claim is moral or not, dependent on whether or not it creates happiness. But Kant, as I say, believes that we have these duties and obligations that are morally right no matter what. And he believes that reason, right, devoid of emotion, reason devoid of emotion is the ultimate guide to right action. And that as beings who have this ability to reason, it's therefore our duty to treat everyone as ends in themselves, never as means to ends. All right, so you never exploit anyone. The idea is that you treat people as full, autonomous, rational beings. All right, and it is your duty to do so, and we'll find out why that is in a moment. So, as I say, Kant attempted to show that through the application of pure reason, devoid of any kind of emotion, moral judgments can be supported objectively, so we can come to know that they are definitely true. Another and very important point is that he does not believe that the consequences of an action are the most important factor in determining moral rightness. In fact, he pays very little attention to consequences at all. It's all about the intention behind the action and ensuring that that intention is in line with acting for the sake of duty, right? Not even in accordance with it, but just for the sake of duty. All right, and through this application of pure reason and acting for the sake of duty, we determine the universal moral truths that exist regardless of consequences. So these are moral absolutes. So let's now look at a summing up of the deontological approach in a simple way. Now, an overly simplistic way to sum up this approach is to say, what if everyone did that, right? So imagine you're thinking of breaking a promise. At that point, Kant says, you have to ask yourself, what if everyone broke promises? Right? In other words, you have to universalize that idea. And his answer is that if everyone broke promises, then the very idea of a promise would collapse, because, of course, there would be no value in the concept of a promise at all if everyone broke them. All right. Now, this is known as contradiction of concept, and as I say, I come back to this in subsequent videos. But it's once you've kind of got that idea of universalization in mind, it's quite easy to see in some cases when contradiction of concept occurs. All right. Similarly, if you were going to tell an untruth, imagine if everyone lied. Well, if everyone lied, then the concept of truth would collapse. So that's contradiction of concept. And of course, Kant also talks about contradiction in will. Right? And so again, you have to ask yourself, what if everyone did that? All right. What if everyone broke promises? Well, if everyone broke promises, you are willing that other people break promises to you. Because bear in mind, if everyone did it, you're saying that other people would do it to you as much as you're doing it to somebody else. All right? And the same goes for lying. All right? So this is the question that we have to answer when we're trying to rationalize how to act. And the example that Kant uses, he says, when I believe myself to be in need of money, I shall borrow money and promise to repay it, even though I know this will never happen. All right? Now, if everyone did that, then, of course, the very idea of credit would collapse. You wouldn't be able to borrow money from anyone because they would know that they weren't going to get it back. The only thing you could do would be to sort of give money away. You wouldn't ever be able to expect it back. Okay, so again, it contradicts the concept of promise, and it also contradicts will, because it's saying you're willing the same thing to happen to you. So, just to sort of sum that up on a slide, think of as many action guiding principles as you can, what Kant calls as maxims, and ask yourself what would happen if everyone did as you wanted to do. Right? Now, it's very, very important to understand that this question of universalization, the what if everyone did that question, that is basically known as the categorical imperative. All right? The idea that you have to run whatever maxim you've got through the categorical imperative, the basic idea being what if everyone did that, and then see what would happen, right, in terms of whether it would contradict will, whether it would contradict concept, and whether you would actually end up treating other people as a means to your own ends. Now, Kant distinguishes between acting for the sake of duty and acting in accordance with duty. And what he's trying to do here is to show the distinction that is brought about by the different intentions, by people's different intentions. All right, and he imagines two shopkeepers. All right, one who does not overcharge his customers through duty, and the other one who doesn't overcharge his customers because he wants to keep them. All right. Now, in this case, no one gets overcharged. All right, but only one of them, according to Kant, is acting for the sake of duty, right? And that's the one that doesn't overcharge his customers because he believes it's his duty not to, all right? The other one doesn't overcharge his customers because he wants to keep them. And in this case, we can see that that shopkeeper is treating his customers as means to his own ends, as means to keeping his business. So whilst the overall consequence looks the same in both cases, we can say that the one who doesn't overcharge his customers because he wants to keep them is only acting in accordance with duty and not for the sake of it. The simple reason for that is that if you had a reputation for overcharging your customers, you would lose your trade. All right. So yeah, any action that accords with duty but is not done for the sake of duty has no moral worth, according to Kant. So it does seem to be the case that there is a definite flavour of human rights in Kant's thinking. All right. So, for example, if we take Article 3 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights, everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. Well, you run that through the categorical imperative. You think, what if everyone did that? And it doesn't contradict concept, okay, because it treats everyone as a full human being, and there is no question of any kind of concept collapsing. It doesn't contradict will, because obviously you're treating everyone else in the same way that you would want to be treated. So you've got the right to life, liberty, and security of person, and it doesn't exploit anyone, so it's not treating anyone as a means to an end. So it would seem that we could look at the UN Declaration of Human Rights and actually see it as a series of Kantian maxims. Now, utilitarians do have some objections here, but bear in mind that Kant actually predated Bentham and Mill. So when you're having this discussion, you can talk about utilitarian objections, but of course also point out that Kant was working before the utilitarians really came to prominence. Now, a utilitarian objection may run along the lines of, you need to kill one person in order to prevent hundreds or thousands of other deaths. So that killing of the one person is treating them as the means to saving lots of others. Now, according to Kant, that's not something you should do, because you're then willing that other people treat you as a means to their own ends, right? And bear in mind, Kant is an absolutist, so there is no flexibility. Now, the utilitarian objection is that Kant's approach is problematic because it disregards consequences in assessing moral worth. And of course, how many times do you hear the phrase, think about the consequences of your actions? In other words, think about morally what you're doing. And of course, the emphasis does seem to be on consequences. So that could be an initial objection to the Kantian approach. And of course, that's not to say that the utilitarian is right, but it's certainly worth raising. Intention is still important, and of course that's perhaps something that the utilitarian doesn't consider all that much. So that's the end of this video. For much more detail on Kant, this really is just a basic approach, but for much more detail, please watch the other two videos that I've put together.